spill?
No, I said the last guy would put ice in here and see what they did, and they spilled, and so I thought I'd go.
Oh, dear.
Before we begin, I might pass around my portfolio, and as we are asking questions, if you want to flip through it, feel free to do so.
Okay.
If not, just pass it.
Thank you.
I take it this is the hot seat.
It is.
Does it feel warm? It's not plugged in.
Depends on your viewpoint.
Yeah.
On behalf of the Hazlet School Board and the board and Hazlet Schools, I'd like to welcome Christina Templin to our district. Ms. Templin is currently the Assistant Superintendent at the DeWitt Public Schools.
Correct.
Let me briefly talk a bit about the procedures and the format. The interview will take approximately 60 to 90 minutes. At the end, Ms. Templin will have a chance to make a statement if you so desire and ask the board any questions that you may have for us. The interview is going to be taped on our Channel 25 and will be aired over the weekend. For those that are here, we have feedback forms on the side table, and then we do also have a form on our website that you can use. Please turn those in to the board secretary. With that, I'm going to start with the first question from Ms. Templin. And the board has had a chance to look at your materials that you sent in, but the audience has not. Would you briefly review your educational background and your employment history for the audience?
I'd be happy to do so. I have 2 degrees from Michigan State University, one in elementary education, and the second one is a master's, of course, in administration. I am also currently enrolled in University of Phoenix, a doctoral program with a dissertation on school finance. So that would be my academic experience to this point. In terms of professional experiences, I began my career out in Colorado, and I worked for several years teaching 2nd grade out there. My husband and I moved back here to complete further studies and also to look for a position closer to family. And so I began to work at Holt Public Schools, and in that capacity I was a teacher, but I was also a site coordinator, and I worked for the Professional Development School Laboratory School, and in that laboratory school I was responsible for the budget and also the professional development and a teacher researcher. I was very fortunate to be able to present on a variety of topics, including multi-age classrooms, developmental curriculums, and also the change process. And so that gave me a great background in understanding the current topics in education at the time, and I moved from that into a principalship at an elementary school. And thoroughly enjoyed that experience for 5 years and benefited from the kinds of complexity of the problems and the situations that you encounter in a principalship. And then I moved as curriculum director to DeWitt, and I've been there for 5 years, and I've had a wonderful experience there. I've learned a great deal. I've contributed multiple programs and initiatives that have been new to the district that I think are positive moves for the district. I have had the opportunity in those 5 years to be acting superintendent on multiple occasions, and I felt very comfortable and confident in that capacity, and certainly learned that I enjoy and feel enthusiastic for this role and the opportunities that superintendency provides. And that's why I'm here today.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I get to ask the second question.
Right.
Hazlet prides itself on being a progressive district. Tell us about how you've worked with others to develop new and creative ideas to advance learning opportunities for children.
Hazlet is actually very similar to DeWitt. We have the same, or roughly the same configuration of students, demographics, very involved and active community. And in the capacity of DeWitt, we have identified multiple programs through the past 5 years that I've been involved in initiating or facilitating or organizing in the transition. It's somewhat uncomfortable for me to say I've done it because I don't do anything alone. I participate in teams, I facilitate, I lead, I organize, but I don't do it alone, so I wouldn't want to claim full responsibility. But in the tenure that I've been here, I've initiated a preschool program, an alternative education program, I've supported a team to develop the school K-12's code of conduct that we had not had in the past. And also, one of the things I'm most proud of is a professional growth and evaluation plan that is very thorough and is linked to Charlotte Danielson's Frameworks for Teaching, that has a very full and rigorous set of rubrics that our teachers are now measured by, that we feel not only measures our staff, but gives them opportunities for collaboration and consensus building and growth and leadership in their own professional capacities. And I've been responsible for that. In the absence of our superintendent for medical reasons recently, I happened to take over during a time when we were having prorated cuts to our foundation grant. And in that time period, I initiated a freeze and monitored the budget daily and developed a budgetary process where we would identify how we were going to set our budget for the coming year, which involved multiple cuts, including teaching positions. And we used a inclusive process, went to every building and conducted presentations. And we had a group of folks that included community members and parents that helped us make decisions that were rational, that were logical, and that were based on a consensus for this budget. And I'm happy to say it was passed in May.
Great.
Can you give us some examples in which you've had several things that needed to be done at the same time that are of equal importance? How did you handle it?
Well, Bev, that's happened all the time. I'm a mother of 4. I learned very quickly how to handle many things hitting at once. I was also a kindergarten teacher for a long time, and so I learned to be patient, be calm, but be organized, be very on top of things, try to plan my time and my responses, and if I couldn't do something right then, to at least make a commitment and tell that person that I was going to address it when I could. I have an ability to handle a great deal of stress and commotion and activity at once, but I like to feel I've put in my prep time ahead of time so that I can do that. And that has enabled me to process through all the responsibilities in my job. As you go through my portfolio and you look at the kinds of responsibilities that I have in my current position, which was recently redesigned 3 years ago, you'll see that I have to handle a lot of different kinds of topics, from policy to budget to professional development, and trying to keep all that straight is very challenging. But I do my homework, and I'm very honest and very thorough, and I use a lot of support from resources and folks around me and build relationships so that I can get some support in doing that.
Thank you.
Yes, Mrs. Templin, can you give us some examples of how your work experience, and you're already starting to touch on these things, how your work experiences qualify you for the Hazlitt superintendency?
Yes, I can. I'm an educator, and I believe very passionately that there is great power in teaching and learning, and that we have a responsibility to communicate that to children. In the capacity of an educator, I also have developed strengths and knowledge and some abilities that I believe we should expect of our superintendents. The next 10 years are going to be challenging for schools. Hazlitt is well poised and well versed and very solid, but Hazlitt too will address the challenges of No Child Left Behind, education yes, and will have to respond to increased requirements for accountability and doing more with less. And those are challenges that need strong leadership. I've been successful in providing leadership with consensus, collaboration, empowerment, and inclusiveness with stakeholders. And I believe in that way we can meet those challenges. And that's my commitment as an educator and to the profession in the art of teaching.
Thank you.
Welcome to Hazlitt.
Thank you, Scott.
We've waited to the 5th question to talk about budget, surprising as it may be in this climate in Michigan, but you've touched on a little bit as far as I think you've been involved somewhat in the development of a budget, certainly in your current position.
Yes.
What do you see as the major goals and objectives that you would be establishing as a superintendent or in developing a budget for a district such as Hazlitt?
Well, I don't believe I would be doing it alone. I believe you have recently hired an excellent business manager, and I believe there's a partnership between the superintendent, the board, and the business manager and the constituents to identify those priorities that are most important to that district. I believe the superintendent and the business manager monitor the budget daily, and that they look for trends, that they try to keep the big picture. But further, I believe that the superintendent has the responsibility to educate our senators and our legislators about the parameters that schools daily deal with in trying to develop a budget. Holding the foundation grant flat and having a fiscal cycle that's very different from a school cycle is very challenging for a school, and we can help our legislators understand that. On the side of the district, I would hope to have ad hoc meetings or small committee meetings where we could frequently, monthly monitor the budget, look for trends, monitor our expenses, and help to identify those kinds of revenues and expenses that we can moderate, change, or provide for that will help take us down the road and put us in good stead. For instance, your fund equity is 2-point-something million, and so that's a very solid fund equity, but we have to safeguard that. When you have a flat foundation grant, we have to monitor our rising expenses and weigh it against that percentage of the operating expenses that we're willing to extend to offset that, or we have to look at making some reasonable cuts. Those are the kinds of decisions and activities that in partnership we need to make, and the superintendent needs to be responsible for leading up that cause.
Just in a way of sort of follow-up, during a period of declining revenue, which certainly is possible here with the news from the state the last couple days, as well as perhaps declining enrollment, which we've had a little bit of, certainly not to any great degree, but some, which, as you know, tax dollars or dollars come with the student.
Yes.
Do you explain to us how you would determine, how you as a superintendent would determine the priorities to reallocate sources of a lesser amount as opposed to the funding, the full funding, or a growing fund? When you're in a declining time, explain how you would prioritize, I guess.
I believe what you're asking me, Scott, is when our revenues are flat or decreasing with their proration, how do we make decisions about educational programming?
Correct.
And maintaining the standards that we feel in this district are important to our community and to our staff and our students. Is that the question?
How you would, yes.
Yes.
As a
Okay.
superintendent, yes.
I believe that you have to have stakeholder input and involvement in making those decisions, and you have to do your homework. You have to understand what kinds of priorities that district sets, compare it against your target goals. I believe you have 4 target goals, and you want to compare the kinds of programming that you have in the district against those target goals. I would also caution us, though, to be very protective of early elementary programming, because early elementary programming has long-term benefits for our students. So if we look at those programs and we set priorities, and we try to make the cuts least directly impacting on the students, I think we can tighten our belt a little bit. However, to do that over 2 to 3 years is going to be tough. We don't have as much room in schools to tighten our belt to the point where it affects children. So if the next part of your question is, how do we protect and preserve our programming so that it doesn't impact kids, we have to then set the priorities of the programming that we have. Is it alternative ed programming? Is it early elementary programming? What kind of philosophies and target goals are we committed to that we set aside and know we have to protect in terms of our budget? In the other areas, we need to look at what kinds of, can we do it differently? Can we make modifications or adjustments in that budget to recoup some of those expenditures?
Very good. Thank you.
Ms. Templin,
Yes, ma'am.
could you give us an idea of your philosophy and experience with the collective bargaining process, please?
Yes. I have had 3 opportunities to work with bargaining and negotiations in terms of a formal context. For instance, we've done 2 rounds of expedited bargaining and 1 contract renewal. And in our district, it has been extremely challenging. We have a very strong union, and we have a very rigid contract. And so it has been challenging to negotiate through those kinds of parameters. However, I've relied on the relationship that I've had ongoing with union members and the UNISERV director to help us facilitate through the bargaining process. We've had 2 successful expedited bargaining rounds, and we're currently in our 3rd. Now, we've negotiated 1-year contracts because of the changing climate in the state funding, however, and the insurance. However, we are moving forward in what I feel are very positive terms. Aside from the bargaining, one of the functions that I perform in the district that I feel very comfortable with is negotiating and conflict resolution. And I've been able to maintain very good relationships under contentious circumstances with our union membership. And we've resolved grievances, and I feel we've maintained a relationship that's in the best interest of our faculty and our students.
Ms. Templin, as superintendent, what do you see as your role in promoting student achievement, and what efforts have you made to ensure that this is a reality in your school district?
We've done a lot, and we feel really proud of achieving an A recently on our reports. And our MEEP scores are quite high. We feel very comfortable and confident of our MEEP scores. When I first came to DeWitt, we didn't have an internal curriculum that was aligned with the state benchmarks and frameworks. So we revamped, I've revamped with committee groups, with teacher leaders, 8 curriculums. And these 8 curriculums have been aligned with either the state or the national standards. Once we aligned the curriculums, then we took a look at instruction. And as you know, you can have a lot of curriculum objectives that look wonderful on paper, but until they take place in the classroom, they're not having an impact on children. And so we've worked a great deal on implementation strategies. How do children learn? What do we know about brain research? How do we construct the classroom environment to best meet the needs of children and how they learn? They learn in a social context. Do we understand that? Do we set that up? They have multiple learning styles. Do we have our lessons planned that accommodate that? We've done a lot of work in that area, especially in the area of literacy and early elementary education. That, of course, is something that I felt very strongly about, that we had to recognize the developmental needs of children and match our implementation instruction with that. So we've made some great gains in that area. Our test scores are consistently moving forward and high, and we feel very comfortable with where we're headed.
Thank you.
Technology is being increasingly used in the schools. Can you give some examples of appropriate roles or possibly things you know about that are opportunities for technology to enhance student instruction?
One of the things that I was involved in is setting up a technology committee in the district that had representatives from all buildings and grade levels. And from that, we tried to develop and empower folks to feel confident and comfortable, also not just in using it themselves, but also in helping others use it and incorporate it into instruction. We developed a 2-layered curriculum that was to teach students skills in technology using a variety of different hardware, software, and peripherals. And then we also developed a 2nd layer of the curriculum, which was to use it to do work. So in other words, we wanted to teach our kids to do keyboarding, but we also wanted to teach them the ethics and the value of using that to do work and produce work. So we have a dual-layer curriculum in technology. This technology committee then serves as a focal group and broadens it out to the buildings, and we train in small groups, and then we train in the buildings at staff meetings and at professional development opportunities. That has helped to expand our use in technology. We passed a bond that enabled us to have a lot of technology, which was wonderful, but unless it's being used, you wonder about the productivity of it. So this was how we managed that 2nd layer, which was to have it in the hands of kids and in the classroom. Our children are doing PowerPoint presentations, they're doing research on the internet, they're using it to produce reports and to make products, they're using it for student demonstrations. To me, that's a whole exciting world that we have available to them that I kind of wish we would have had when we were young.
Well, following up, you made a point about productivity. How have you gone about evaluating the effectiveness then of the technology you are using?
We conduct a yearly STAR assessment, which is an assessment that our teachers complete, and it's a 5-point system, and they evaluate their integration with classroom, their integration with curriculum, their personal use in technology, and whether or not they've been collaborating and teaching others technology. From those uses, we collect information and data, and we yearly revise our technology plan that we submit to the state in order to give us guidance on what we need to do and how we need to move forward.
Athletics and co-curricular activities are very important in our community and to our students. Would you share with us your philosophy concerning both?
I believe that athletics are as important as academics, especially to the student who needs an opportunity to excel and develop self-esteem. That may be their avenue for demonstrating that they can do something that's magnificent, and we need to offer that opportunity to them. It's always a very difficult challenge to look at funding issues related to athletics and to look at do we charge a co-pay, are our gate fees enough, how much of the general fund is going towards it, what kind of support the community has for it. But we need to support athletics as a part of a healthy young adult, and we need to have those provisions in our programming and accept that.
Ms. Templin,
Yes,
share
ma'am.
with us your experiences in working with special needs students.
We have, when I first came, we were not in a position to have a centralized management of our special education system and students. It was handled at the building level. Now, as we've grown, that's become complicated, and you can't sustain that over time. So we have organized that on a district basis, and I was the first part of handling that special education because we didn't have a coordinator. And so we revised protocols for student support teams in every building, which are now operating. We developed a protocol for 504s, which we had not been providing for. And then we developed protocols for referring students and then going through the IEP process. And one of the things that was really important is we had not been communicating very well to our parent population about the process, about their rights, about the kinds of programming that we could offer. And so we've stepped that up, and we've come up to the plate on that and provided those materials and resources for families. Since then, we've hired a special education director, and now that person is handling that program very successfully.
Great. Have you been involved in developing alternative methods to deliver services? You may have as a part of doing that job, but
Educational services?
Yeah.
Yes. I was a part of leading a group to develop an alternative education program. At first, we tried a partnership with Bath Community Schools. The numbers had dwindled from Bath, and so we ended up having a very solid core from DeWitt. And these were students that had no other options, were not learning in the traditional environment, and we knew we could save these kids. So we developed an alternative ed program. It's a classroom. It has 18 students in it. It's our second year of running, and we have a graduating student this year, so we're very happy about that. It's right behind my office, so I provide some administrative support for that as well and pitch it for them whenever needed. And we put something in that program that is, I think, a key to reaching the alternative ed student, and that's a community service piece. And that happens every Friday in that program, and that's been very successful for our students. We've also developed a summer school program for students that are struggling in grades K through 3, and that happens for literacy and also for math. And then we put in a preschool program that we operate through the district, and that supports all of our students, and they are they go to preschool, they can do childcare, and then they transition into the kindergarten environment. We've tried to preserve a mix of high-functioning students and students of need, so that we can keep some support for students that are in our district that we know about and we've identified and we should feel responsible for helping. We use the high scope curriculum, which is a very good developmental curriculum.
thank you.
Mrs. Templin, have you ever been involved in a situation in which you know the student's needs, that they have a need, and you have a knowledge of the capabilities of the district, and have been able to devise or create a beneficial action for the students?
I thought you were going to say that I knew what they needed, but we couldn't provide it.
Well,
Because sometimes that happens too. If we know what a student needs, and if we have within our wherewithal to provide it, I believe we have an obligation to provide it. And it's not always what we would consider a normal programming. We can individualize, and we have a responsibility to differentiate programming for students based on their need. Every student is entitled to an individualized development plan. Not necessarily a special education individualized educational program, but they're entitled to have their needs met where they are with their skills and abilities or needs. And we can make those accommodations in classrooms. If it means longer time for testing, if it means a timeout space at the end of the day where someone can check on their homework, we can find a way to meet those needs. Somehow, sometimes we have to think differently, out of the box, look at the big picture, reconfigure our roles, or expand our understandings in order to make and tailor some of those choices for kids. But I believe we can do that and that we have an obligation to.
okay, let me ask just a follow-up on that. What if they aren't special needs students? What if it's just the high school students
Exactly,
that are not special need?
right. We have a responsibility to
Okay.
accommodate for the needs of that student.
Do you have any examples of something that might have occurred while you were?
Many times I can
Principal?
think of, we have a student right now who is not a special needs student, but struggles with study skills and follow-through, and has a very non-supportive home environment. And with that student, we've scheduled 45 minutes at the end of the day with an at-risk teacher, even though the child doesn't necessarily qualify for at-risk, to have that person check in with other students that are at risk, so that that student has someone that can keep track of their homework, when it's due, and help provide some study skill support. That kind of support is needed for that child, and that's what helps. We also have a student that has trouble focusing his attention for 7 periods a day at the 6th grade. He's slightly immature. It's not special needs. That student needs an hour block out a day. That student has a self-designed study hall with a counselor for that hour a day. We tailor instruction like that all the time for children, and we should do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Sort of along the same vein, only not quite the student thing. From with your knowledge and with your expertise, can you give us some examples of how you have impacted some of the employees that work with you and for you, as far as with your knowledge, with your skills, to enhance their skills and knowledge or principles, in other words, you've helped them grow? Can you give us some examples of how you've done that?
Absolutely. One of the things that I believe very strongly about is that educational leaders have a responsibility to grow leaders, and that's a commitment that we should embrace. I have worked to develop a teacher leadership team, and that may sound like a collection of folks to come together to talk about curriculum. But there is a method to my madness, and that is I wish to teach group facilitation skills, presentation skills. I want to teach leadership skills to promote collaboration within the grade level or the department. So I meet with folks monthly. There's a representative from every grade level, and there's a design in the portfolio about how I laid that out. That framework was deliberately set to collect teacher leaders together and empower them to go back to the buildings, back to their grade level, and to have the skills that they need, not just the format, but the skills, to be teacher leaders at that grade level or department and do some fostering of growth within their own department. The second thing that I have done is to, I lead and coordinate the principals group, and I meet with them twice a month, and those meetings can be informative sessions where you talk about field trips or budgets or teaching supplies, those kind of problems that we all run into. But we've started a book study with that group, and we're talking about leadership skills. We're talking about in-box, out-of-box scenarios and how we might all resolve those to try to build some consensus and some collaboration, some understanding from a person that's at a strictly kindergarten building and a person that's at a high school building. So we can have that collective knowledge be a part of the strength of the district. Those are two ways that I've set up to try to promote leadership.
Thank you.
Mrs. Templin, could you give us an idea of your concept of team building with the board?
Team building with the board is a partnership, and I've learned that there are opportunities to work together in advances and retreats, and that bonding is important. But one of the keys I've learned is to develop a relationship with each and every board member. They're individuals as well as a collective. I've also learned that the worst thing that a board member could be set up for is to not know or be informed about something, and that it's my responsibility as a superintendent to make sure that they're informed, they have all the information they need, they have the background about why something happened, so that when they're walking the dog and someone confronts them out in the neighborhood, they have an understanding and a natural response and a high level of trust in how something was handled. So that relationship doesn't just occur. It takes nurturing, takes communication, takes articulation on a frequent basis. I do a lot of phone calling. We do monthly meetings. I do a confidential memo that goes to the board twice a month that we talk about what's happened, what's new. If something happens, like we had a lockdown recently in our district, we call the board members. We let them know immediately so they don't have to hear it on the news or be surprised about it. Those kinds of steps that I would take as superintendent are important for the board to feel that we're a team, that we're a partnership, that we're not taking this for granted, and that you're responsible as I'm responsible for watching out for the entire district. And so those are the steps I would take.
Thank you.
Describe a situation in which you came with a proposal to your board or supervisor that you were very high on that was rejected, and describe what you did in that situation and why.
I believe you have to keep conversations going. If they rejected it, they have a very good reason for rejecting it. And I need to be a good listener and understand what that is. If it means going back and doing more homework, if it means solicitation of more feedback, if it means more conversation or more time, maybe the timing isn't right. For instance, we had a very difficult issue of school of choice to wrestle with in our district. School of choice in our community is a very sensitive topic. There would be a right time and a wrong time for embracing this, for looking at this. For instance, when the budget is in dire needs and we're looking at cutting program, our community may be more receptive to considering school of choice than they are in other circumstances. So when the board gives me direction, this is not the right time, or have you checked out this, or the legal language of that, I know that I have my marching orders, and I make sure that I figure out and give them the information that they need to make an appropriate decision.
Thank you.
The superintendent is, as you know, is a recognized leader of the school district. And as such, leading through the vision and values of the district is imperative. Okay. Have you ever been in a situation when you had to redirect the activities of staff, employees, parents, to be in accord with the district's vision and values, and how did you go about doing that?
Yes. I'm assuming that you're talking about discipline.
No, not necessarily.
Not
It could be
necessarily?
it could be any situation that deviate the actions, the way they handle a situation that deviates from the vision or the values held by the district.
Okay.
They aren't accord. It does. If you have an example for discipline, that's fine. But it doesn't have. It's not limited to that.
Okay. One of the first steps I would take if there were a faculty member that was moving in a direction that was inconsistent with either my vision and directives or that of the board in terms of the goals that the board had set in a strategic plan, I would have a coaching mentoring session with that faculty member. And that means that I would confirm and reiterate the vision and direction of the board and myself, and that we would talk about the ways that that person could support that goal or directive and the behaviors that they may be engaging in that are detracting or not supporting those goals. And so we would coach and set up a timeline, and we would talk about the steps that they could actively take in that direction or in order to help shift their thinking, their philosophy about a certain topic or issue, whatever it happened to be. If that ends up resulting in an action or behavior where discipline is necessary, then we need to follow protocol and process. The one thing that will hurt us the most is if we make an error in process when we're disciplining. I also believe that every single person is entitled to respect and dignity. We can still discipline, we can still talk about corrective behaviors, but we have to respect that person. That's their livelihood if they're a faculty member. That's their passion, and we have to understand that. Does that mean if we have someone that is not teaching the best interests of our children or not performing their duties in the best interests of our children that we would let that go? Absolutely not. We can respect and discipline.
Okay. The next question deals with the building infrastructure of the district. Describe experience that you have in new construction, renovation, building maintenance, that area.
When I was in St. John's, our buildings were very old, and they were well constructed when they were constructed, but they needed renovation, and we needed to build some more because we had been growing. A bond had not passed in the past 3 attempts, and so it was a very uncomfortable position to be in to need to go for another bond. I noticed that you've passed several in the past years, and you're very fortunate. So in St. John's, we struggled to do that. I was involved in the campaign to get the bond passed and the programming for that bond. We did pass the bond, and then we built 2 new buildings, and we added on to all the existing buildings. And I was a part of that project. I'm proud to say that the building that I was involved in came in under budget, which was no small feat when you have 50-odd viewpoints of how a wall should be constructed. But we managed to develop something that we felt very proud of. It moved along, it was on time, and it was under budget. There were challenges. You know, there was an asbestos removal that no one had known about, and then concerned parents that, you know, logically had concerns about that. So there were challenges along the way, and we learned to deal with those. I also learned to rely on everyone else too. This affected the entire community, and so the entire community needed to be a part of resolving those kinds of issues.
Thank you.
As you know, a superintendent must be an accomplished communicator. What do you believe your strengths are in this area?
I like to think that I'm a competent communicator. I enjoy thinking about my practice, thinking about education. I believe I bring into conversations relationships, my understanding of children, my being a parent. I'm married to a fellow educator, so there are a lot of interesting debates around dinner. And I believe that that has contributed a wealth of empathy and understanding in my conversations or communications about how we do work in schools. I think another thing that comes through in my language, at least I hope it comes through, is my commitment to childhood and protecting and preserving childhood. I believe that every adult has a responsibility to safeguard the experiences that children have, and that those kinds of experiences can make a difference in the kind of adult that they become. And I hope that I share that passion and that commitment for what I do, the enthusiasm for this role. I believe we have a lot of opportunities in schools to make great impacts on kids and adults in our community.
Thank you.
Mrs. Templin, can you give us an example of how you dealt with a difficult parent, and I'm sure you've dealt with difficult parents,
Just a few.
who had a valid complaint against the district or against one of your administrators or teachers that you were responsible for, and how you dealt with it?
By the time they come to see me, they're quite worked up. And so one of the first things I try to do is do a lot of listening and try to share in their feeling and understanding from their perspective about why something egregious happened to them. And I believe that even if they may have a perspective I can't agree with, that I can say, I'm sorry they're feeling that way, because certainly we wouldn't want a family to experience those kind of feelings in our district. Then I try to shift to, what can we do to resolve this issue? What to you is feeling like something that needs to happen so that we can move forward? And how do we repair this? Now, I will say, usually I try to refer the person, or ask them at least, back to the building, back to the teacher, back to the incident that happened. Have you talked to them? What was their response? How did that work for you? Can I sit with you while you meet with them? Because I would like that the person that it happened with to be a part of the solution. And I believe that's one of the things that's very important to all of us, maintaining a healthy operating balance. If they've already tried that and that hasn't worked, then I know I have to step in and help them work through that with that person. Usually we're able to do that and find a way to do that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think I have an easy one for you, because
Yay.
looking at your portfolio, I'm going to ask you a question about strategic planning. And I noticed back in the fall of 2000, in the DeWitt Bath Review, that you wrote an article about strategic planning.
Yes.
So my question is, would you please basically, I think, summarize or describe the steps that you would take to develop a strategic plan? And I think it was probably your 5 steps in that article. But
Yes. Well, one of the things that we try to do is set the stage in developing the strategic plan by having some discussions about our philosophy, what kind of priorities we had. And so we worked with our board and our administrative team to identify, was the school the hub of the district? What norms would we agree to operate from? What beliefs did we have that we felt we could support? And from that, we developed a list of priorities. Now, it was very interesting because you would expect a business manager to be very concerned about our goal of fiscal responsibility. But the way that we organized is we did round-robin tables where we mixed up talking with different people so that we had many voices represented on each and every goal. So each and every person was responsible for talking about curriculum, continuous improvement, fiscal responsibility, technology. From that, we developed those 5 goals. Then we broadened those out to the faculty community and asked for ideas and strategies on how we could attack each of those goals, what kinds of things were important. We developed the strategies that go with them, and so we have the 5 basic goals and strategies, and we all work towards them. We also instituted administrative reports monthly, and in these administrative reports, we asked folks to tell us, what kinds of things have you been doing in your building or in your role and capacity that support and promote the achievement of these goals? And they respond by those 5 goals and the strategy. So there's a direct connection between practice and the goals. It makes them alive. It helps bring to focus, too, every time we work in the building, well, that's a district goal. That's something we believe in. That's a priority. When we make a decision, we remember those 5 goals and we make the decision based on that.
is that the evaluation process? How do you evaluate? I'm not sure if that, what you just said there at the end, is how you evaluate your progress of the strategic plan. Is that the overall evaluation, or is there, I didn't see it in the article.
That's the construction of the target goals that we identified. That's how we constructed the target goals.
So how do you evaluate the progress of your plan then?
Yeah, we revisit those every year. And we go through our target goals and we do measurements. I bring the target goals back to the curriculum groups, and we go through each of the goals and say, how have we been achieving in this? And we measure with MEP reports, we measure with our budget, we measure with our technology. The technology plan's evaluated every year and feeds into that. We have measurements that go into that. We've also, since that was written, started a Zoomerang online survey where we survey our community about their feelings and attitudes towards our achievement of these target goals. That's done yearly, and then we take that information and we have an advance with our leadership group again every year. And then that funnels into the curriculum groups. That's how we try to build the bridge out into the community with the target goals. We're just about ready to engage in that again.
Okay, thank you.
Finish right here. you mind giving us a few examples or an example of your collaborative arrangements with the community?
One of the things that we've tried to set up is a community outreach program. We recognize that public relations are very important in our district, and that we have a very articulate, well-versed, knowledgeable community that considers themselves partners in schools, and so we need to be able to give them the information that enables them to fulfill that role that they desire. We have superintendent's coffees, and I go to breakfast at Sam's Kitchen. It's the local dive. Everyone goes there on Wednesday morning, and so that was the place to be. And so we go there and we have a coffee and we sit around a table, and anyone that wants to come and talk with the superintendent can come and talk. And we visit and we chat, and you would find out the scoop about everything in DeWitt by going to that meeting. We also have a superintendent's advisory forum, and that's a once-a-month forum. I try to set up presentations that are informative. We had a presentation on special education. Since we've made so many changes with special education, we needed to communicate that, not just to parents of special education students. So we set up a forum where that was the topic. We've talked about MEP scores, disseminating. We did the practice MEP. You probably did that here. Sharon probably facilitated that. We've had topics on how to start off your kindergartner, what kind of skills and abilities they really need, and why aren't they bringing papers home in kindergarten and first grade. So those superintendent's forums have been very well attended. We also try to have neighborhood coffees. I have not gone on those, but we've set up 2 of those recently, and it's been in response to questions about our budget cuts, and they've been very well attended and very successful, so that's probably something we're going to look at doing more of. I believe the more that you can reach out into a community, go to Kiwanis. I've presented to parent-teacher organizations. I've presented to the Kiwanis group. I've presented to the business organizations. We've invited realtors into our district to try to give them information about our district and how they can promote the district. In DeWitt, we function, the schools function as a hub. We have a younger community, and so we know that everyone is connected in some way to the schools, and so we try to branch out from that.
Thank you.
Ms. Templin, talk about what you do the first 100 days on the job, and what would you like to accomplish?
I've actually thought about that a great deal. Because Hazlitt is so very much like DeWitt, I very thoughtfully and deliberately applied for this position. I'm not the kind of person that would move from district to district, so I've done my homework and checked things out, and I'm very comfortable with DeWitt from a long time back because I've been a part of visiting the district. I visited Wilkshire when you first developed that in the 1980s, because we were doing the multi-age program too. I believe that Hazlitt is the kind of community that would like me to listen, to respect their history and their tradition, to feel confident and comfortable in the work that they have done. In my estimation, you have a very wonderful opportunity with the partnership with MSU for your preschool. You have a wealth of trained, highly qualified people at the early elementary grades, and in fact all the grades, but I particularly noticed that you handpicked and spent a lot of time and energy in early education. I believe that those kinds of things in Hazlitt need recognition and celebration and monitoring and attention and respect, and that would be my job to take some learning time to understand that and support that the best I can. From that, I also understand that I would need to develop relationships with the board and to understand each of you, your perspectives, your interests, your needs, your desires, to help new board members come on board when that happens in June 14th. I know that relationships with the administrative group are very important. I would want to start developing that. I would like to do that by soliciting their leadership in terms of help us understand and revisit how we operate, how we do business, what our priorities are. and put some of them in leadership roles to cover that ground for all of us. I believe I need to be visible out in the community, greeting people, introducing myself, going to businesses, being in all the buildings, especially the first day, sharing my enthusiasm and motivation with faculty to start a new year with a superintendent that they don't know, and they've had Bob for so long. That's going to be quite a transition for them. It's going to be very hard for people to feel comfortable with someone new, and it's my job to try to establish that.
Thank you.
Okay, I have the last question. In a minute, you can breathe a sigh of relief. This one is kind of broad, and you can answer it any way you want. Based on all your accomplishments, which you have had many, can you tell us what you've done to make DeWitt School District more effective? You can take that any way you want. You can approach it from any you choose, but how in your tenure at DeWitt have you made it more effective?
I believe there are many accomplishments that I like to think I've had a hand in. But the thing that is probably most important to me and would be a priority is that I believe you can lead a district with honesty and respect and trustworthiness. And sometimes I think that's hard found in our schools. And I would like to think that if you asked anyone in our district, that they would say our relationship is based on that. And that while the standards are high, and I said high expectations, that it's because I care so deeply about kids. And I believe that's why we're here. And if we can get to square one with that and deal with each other honestly and with trust, then I think we can accomplish a lot of the problems that we face on a day-to-day basis in schools. I try to treat parents that way, faculty that way, community members that way, peers. And I think that's probably what I'm most known for in my district.
Thank you. Now you can breathe a sigh of relief and take a few minutes to collect your thoughts. And at that, feel free to make a statement to the board if you so desire, or ask us any questions you may have.
I don't believe at this time, well, I take that back. I do have one question, but I would like to start off by saying that I thought long and hard coming to this interview today and preparing for it. And I feel 100% committed to embracing this challenge in the district and making you feel proud of your choice. And I believe I have the skills and the knowledge that would help you to feel confident about that. But my question would be, Hazlitt is a fantastic district with many opportunities, and I'm sure you have challenges too, but the opportunities are glowing and your accomplishments are wonderful. What do you see as the main challenge for a new superintendent in this district?
Anybody want to start?
Want me to?
Go ahead.
Me. Well,
Phil.
right now we're blessed. I mean, our budgets are balanced and things like that. But I mean, we have several that are related. One, we have a decline in enrollments. We know the budget picture isn't going to get better. We don't want to sacrifice our excellence. In fact, we like to get to all A's on our MEPs too. And I think that's going to be a challenge for this. How are you going to align the high expectations here, not only of the board, but of the community, of the faculty, and of the students, with the resources we have to sustain towards an A+. I think it's going to be a major challenge. I'm going to let Scott defer to the next one, because I think, unless you know, anticipating the question about the board turning over.
Yeah, there's going to be a challenge in Hazlitt because of some board I'm not going to say upheaval, just turnover. I mean, we're a little long of tooth, some of us. The gentleman to my right is in his last month after 12 years, and there's probably going to be some turnover the following year. So there's going to be some new board members, and we have some board members here that are relatively new, learning fast, good board members, but nevertheless new. So that's going to be a challenge. When you say get to know the board better and help them, that will be a challenge for a superintendent, because that's going to be a need in this district as far as the changing faces of the board. Another challenge will be to live up to the predecessors, because we've been, as Phil said, we've been somewhat blessed with long-term superintendents, 10 years from Jeremy and 14 years from Bob, so we've only had 2 in 24 years, and most districts aren't, DeWitt being an example of that, have turned over 2 superintendents in a much quicker fashion than we do. So that will be a challenge for the superintendent. Not that it's, possible that superintendents would move on from here. I mean, for a variety of reasons, but nevertheless, that will be something. A standard has been set here, somewhat. We think that will be tough to be compared to. So,
Big shoes to fill.
yeah.
The only thing I would add is that we also have a new financial director that hasn't started yet. So that'll be, I think, a challenge for a new superintendent to be working with a new financial director, to try to, especially at this point in time while school funding is up in the air and changing daily.
A lot of problems to sort out.
Anybody else? Okay. Any other questions?
No, I just am willing to answer any questions that you have, or give me a call at any time. I'm very appreciative that you've offered me an interview, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Well,
you.
Christina, we're very pleased that you showed a strong interest in this position and your time you spent with us. We'll finish our interviewing process, and then we'll make the decisions, and we'll let you keep you informed as soon as we make
That
those.
sounds great, Mike.
Thanks.
Or Phil, rather.